It is officially football season, and we are all excited here at the HawgBeat Hour. I'm your host, Mason Choate. We got Andrew Hutchinson, the managing editor of HawgBeat.com, and then we got Alex Trader, who's just been doing a heck of a job over at HawgBeat, covering some recruiting, doing a little bit here and there, going to high school football games. We're very thankful to have Alex along. And what we're really thankful for is for football to be back. That is a blessing. It's like Christmas. And we're super excited for Arkansas versus Rice this weekend. We're going to do a deep dive on that coming up on the show. And then we got some injury updates. We got some recruiting tidbits. And then Hutch is going to talk to someone from Rice. Make sure you hit up that interview later on in the episode. It was great, and it'll give you a good insight on the Owls. So first, we're going to start off with some news of the week. There are some injuries going on in the Razorback locker room. We know of John Ridgway. We know of Traylon Burks. We know that likely those two aren't going to play, but can you tell us anything more about that, Hutch?
Yeah, I mean, those are the two big ones. Both those guys are projected starters. John Ridgway kind of caused a scare throughout the fan base over the weekend. Last weekend is about, 9 o'clock Saturday night. And I got a text from a buddy and was like, hey, why is John Ridgway in the hospital? I said, what? Sure enough, he had posted a picture of himself in a hospital bed on his Instagram story. Sam Pittman does not like that, but that led to some people digging into it. And I think the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette had reported that he had an appendectomy. So no timetable for whenever they, he's able to return, but they haven't officially ruled him out for this weekend. I think Sam Pittman said he's doubtful. But again, he had an appendectomy on Saturday. He's not playing a week later. I don't care who you are, even if you're a big time Division I athlete, you're going to be out for a little bit after having a surgery like that. Traylon Burks, we know less about him. We know it's a lower leg injury, and we know that he's been out of practice for about a couple of weeks now. Hasn't been practicing. They've been very secretive about it at Arkansas. They have not given out much information for a while. Sam Pittman said that, he'll be back for Rice. He'll be fine. He's going to be back for Rice. And then this week rolled around and he kind of changed his tone a little bit. It turned into, he might be, he might not be. We're going to have to see. And they were going to, get through Monday and Tuesday and see how it was on Wednesday. And then again, reassess on Thursday and Friday. But at this point, I would be very surprised if we see Traylon Burks on Saturday. That stinks for us, selfishly, because he's an incredible player. But it's probably the right call because you should be able to beat Rice without Traylon Burks. Now, the next week against Texas, you probably need a Traylon Burks to win that game. So probably playing it safe with him. Haven't heard anything else other than that. But I would be shocked if either one of those guys, Ridgway or Burks, plays on Saturday against Rice.
So those are the two that we're pretty positive are not going to be out there on Saturday. But there's some other guys who we've seen in some green jerseys at practice, and we feel confident that they're going to play. But Hutch, I just want to get your input and see kind of what you've been seeing at practice from guys like Miles Slusher. We know Jalen Catalon's probably going to play, but there's been some rumors about Traylon Smith, Hudson Henry. We think it was just a sickness, but can you give us some more information on the other guys that have been going around in green jerseys?
Yeah, about a week ago, we went out to practice and there was, I don't know, 11, 12 guys in green jerseys. It was incredible. I've never seen quite as many green jerseys at a practice. And, the big ones, I mean, Jalen Catalon, he's been dealing with a shoulder injury thing off and on. But he should be 100%. That's what Sam Pittman said. And I expect that to be the case. Blake Kern, the starting tight ends, he's been in green for the last week or so. He should be fine. Trying to think, it was Hayden Henry he had missed Monday's practice, and he was at practice on Tuesday, fully dressed out in full pads, but kind of standing off to the side at practice. He apparently has been dealing with a little bit of an illness, but there is zero concern there that he'll be able to play. He is listed as an or starter with bumper pool. There's no telling who actually gets the starting nod for that second linebacker spot next to Grant Morgan. But he's a significant player. You mentioned Miles Slusher. He's probably, of all the green jerseys, probably the one that doesn't sound like he's going to play. We don't know any details about his injury. He's been at practice in green, but I mean, I haven't been able to see. Like, I haven't noticed him limping or favoring an arm or anything like that. But apparently, he is not likely to play. I can't remember the exact phrasing that Sam Pittman used, but he did not sound optimistic that he would be available. But he's kind of a, I guess if they went into their I guess it would be a 3-2-6 defense with 6 defensive backs and extra safety on the field. He would probably be a backup in that scenario. But in the traditional, I guess a 4-2-5 defense, he's actually listed as a third teamer on the depth chart. So not a huge significant loss, but again, you'd probably like to have him back and have all hands on deck the following week against Texas.
So, I mean, that's not terrible news, especially the fact that you got most of your guys. I think that if Traylon Burks can't play, that's fine. It gives some of the younger wide receivers like a Keyshawn Jackson or a less experienced receiver at Arkansas, at least like Jaquaylin Crawford, to get their chance to get some experience in before the real test comes against Texas next week. So it could be a good thing that Burks doesn't play. Of course, you always want arguably your best player on the field, but and then, of course, John Ridgeway, you're going to need a good pass rush against a Rice team that has some talent at quarterback, especially if you have a McCaffrey back there just running around because we know what he can do. So those are injuries, but let's move on to team captains. Team captains were named, and I think we could kind of guess a few of them. I mean, you had to guess Grant Morgan for sure. Jalen Catalon is almost a lock as well. KJ Jefferson, quarterback, that's almost a lock as well. And then Myron Cunningham. And then the one that's interesting to me is Joe Fouché. And what Sam Pittman said I thought was awesome was just the guy who was most excited to be named captain was Joe Fouché. And he said that his pathway to being captain and just his story at Arkansas is really interesting. So I just wanted to know what you guys think. I guess we can start with Alex on that one. Just Joe Fouché being named captain and how awesome you think that is, man.
Yeah, and we got to talk to the captains on Tuesday, and Grant Morgan had that same sentiment, that he was the most excited for Joe to be named captain going into the season. And Pittman's been hinting that Joe Fouché has a story and he wants that story to be shared with the media and with the public. And, Joe got asked about it and his response was that story is going to come throughout the season. It'll roll out in pieces. So I'm really excited to see, what he's able to do and how that story is able to unfold. As for the rest of the guys, I think having KJ as a captain is a big step. You look around the country and usually the quarterback of successful teams is a captain in that locker room and is able to step up and prove that leadership. And the fact that KJ has already been voted to that by his teammates going into his first year as the starter, I think that's a big step for the Arkansas offense.
Yeah, I think that KJ Jefferson being named starter and just the confidence that you hear from his teammates throughout camp is really encouraging if you're an Arkansas fan, because this is his first year as the true starter at quarterback. And to know that the teammates believe in him as a leader and that, he probably believes in himself as well, that's a big deal, especially for this offense. So, Hutch, what do you have to say about the captains? Were there any surprises? I don't really think so, but who do you think is the true leader of this team, like overall? Is it easy to say it's Grant Morgan?
I think Grant Morgan is the heart and soul of this team. I really do. Kind of like, I think about it, baseball, Casey Opitz was the heart and soul of the baseball team. He may not have had the best stats or whatever. Of course, Grant Morgan, he may have the best stats, but he's probably not the best pro prospect on this team. I mean, everybody knows what Jalen Catalon and Traylon Burks. I mean, those are guys that could be a first-round draft picks. No one's talking about Grant Morgan like that. And but he is the guy. I mean, he's a former walk-on. He's from Arkansas. His older brother played at Arkansas. He's proved all the doubters wrong, myself included in that. And so I feel like he's probably, the heart and soul of the team. And so that was probably the least surprising. I mean, I could have picked that easily. He was probably out. If there was a unanimous pick, he would have to be it. But I did want to add one thought on KJ Jefferson. Y'all kind of talked about, the teammates believe in him as a leader and everything. But this also tells me, there's always going to be talk about the backup quarterback. And, is this backup quarterback really should be the guy? Everyone's favorite player is the backup quarterback because we don't know what he is. And lots of talk, especially with how well Malik Hornsby performed in the last scrimmage. There's like, well, should he maybe be the guy? Is he maybe better than KJ? Well, the players certainly don't think that, because if the players thought or had any type of thought that Malik would end up being the starting quarterback 4 games into the season, you probably wouldn't vote for KJ Jefferson to be team captain. So that to me tells me that they have faith in him, not only as a leader, but as the guy that's going to be behind center all season long, barring injury.
All right, guys, let's move on to some freshmen that we expect to see, not just against Rice, but throughout the season before we wrap up this segment. I kind of hit one earlier, Ketron Jackson. I think that he's definitely going to see plenty of playing time on the offensive side of the ball. But Hutch, we'll start with you. Who are some freshmen that you're looking at to make an actual impact this year for the Hogs?
Yeah, the 2 obvious ones are Ketron Jackson, like you mentioned. Sam Pittman's already said he's arguably the 3rd best receiver on the team already and making a push for 2nd, behind Treylon Burks. So he's going to make an impact, I feel like. And then Rocket Sanders, he's been named the 2nd team running back. He was a 4-star recruit, just like Ketron. And it sounds like he's going to be that guy. And he kind of complements Traylon Smith very well because he's a lot bigger and he's more physical. He's still relatively new to the position, so that's going to be interesting to see how he adjusts to that, especially at the highest level of college football in the SEC. But I expect him to make an impact. And then, some other guys that we're probably going to get to see as far as freshmen, Jaden Johnson in the secondary. He's a backup. He's kind of a reserve right now, but I fully expect him to get some snaps and then also contribute on special teams. Sam Pittman said we might see Chris Paul, the linebacker. He's kind of, he's not on the depth chart because they only went 2 deep, but he is probably a 3rd team linebacker right now. And I think they have a lot of high expectations for him in the future. But I wouldn't be surprised if he plays a handful of snaps on defense and contributes on special teams this year. And then as far as some other guys, I'm trying to think who else comes to mind. I mean, Bryce Stevens, we might see a little bit of, and some guys like that. But really, I think those are the Ketron and Rocket Sanders. Those are probably the guys that are going to get the most snaps out of that freshman class.
All right, coming up next, Hutch is going to talk with Matthew Bartlett, director and editor over at theroost.com. He's going to give you an insight on the Rice Owls. And then after that, we're going to talk about the Rice Owls ourselves and see how they stack up against the Razorbacks.
Hey, everybody, this is Andrew Hutchinson. I'm the managing editor of HawgBeat.com, the Arkansas site and the Rivals Network. If you're watching or listening to this, congratulations. You made it. It's officially game week, and in a few days, Arkansas will be kicking off the 2021 season against Rice. Something I did near the end of baseball season and want to continue during football season is chatting with an expert on the Hogs' upcoming opponent. In most cases, that means finding somebody who covers them on a regular basis. And the guy I'm joined with this week does an excellent job of covering the Owls. Matthew Bartlett is the editor of The Roost, which is one of the top sources for Rice sports news anywhere on the internet. He was kind enough to give us some time to preview the Hogs season opener. Matthew, how are you today?
Hey, Andrew. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. And I was going to start off with kind of more of a broad question. I know Rice, they went 2-3 last year. It was a weird pandemic season, but they did beat a ranked Marshall team. They were competitive on all 3 of their losses. What's kind of the mood around the program, both among the fan base and the people there in the football building entering 2021?
Well, the mood and expectations are getting fairly high to where they've been. When Mike Bloomer was brought in the 2018 season, this is a team that had lost a lot of talent and was in a full-blown rebuild. And over the past couple years, we've seen that win total tick up a game or two each year, and the talent level get to a point where it can compete. And so 2020 was actually the year most people circled as, all right, we're going to be there. We'll be ready. We'll have the team there. And then COVID happened, and they had a crazy rash of injuries in 5 games out of 12. So that's kind of put it on pause for a year. The Marshall win kind of solidified that, okay, things are going in the right direction. But now all eyes are turned to 2021 is the breakthrough year for the Owls.
And let's kind of talk about that 2021 team. I know the number one thing people always want to talk about is the quarterback position. I know even here at Arkansas, where KJ Jefferson's been the clear starter, it's been a topic all offseason. You've been lucky or unlucky enough, depending on how you look at it, to cover a true quarterback battle in camp. From your perspective, how was that unfolded between Wiley Green and Luke McCaffrey?
Well, I'll say this is the fourth fall camp under Mike Bloomgren, and it's the 4th year in a row I've covered a quarterback battle that's gone up to basically the final week. So maybe luck is an eye of beholder. I'm certainly ready for a guy if we get there. Bloomgren said during his media availability this week that both guys were going to play. I think really it comes down to 2 things. First, the athleticism that Luke McCaffrey possesses is unrivaled compared to anybody else on this roster. He ran circles around Big Ten opponents and made it look easy, especially on the ground. He's got a good arm, so that's there. What he lacks is something that Wiley Green, his challenger, has, and Wiley's been here for 4 years. And this is not a conventional high school kind of college morph spread that has 7 plays and a couple of shifts thrown in. It's a complicated pro offense. So that's kind of made things interesting where Wiley clearly can run. He can talk the scheme as well, if not better than some of his coaches. And McCaffrey has that athleticism and can move around, and has Bloomgren called his right arm a howitzer during the presser this week. So he can do a couple things. He just might not know the full breadth of the playbook to the same degree. So I think you'll see both of them on Saturday, and I think you'll get a good dose of that until Rice figures out if there's going to be a guy.
Yeah, that was going to be kind of my next question. I mean, he did say that both of them are going to play, and you mentioned this is your 4th year covering a quarterback battle, and so I was wondering, like, in the past, has he used 2 guys before? And when he says 2 guys, I mean, is it truly going to be a 50-50, or do you think one guy may take the majority of the snaps and the other guy get a series here and there? Or what's your take on what you think might unfold on Saturday?
So the past couple years, it's been a bunch of guys with probably comparable skill sets. Not anyone with the rushing component that McCaffrey brings. Giovanni Johnson, who is an Arkansas native, he has played a couple of past years, and he's handled more of the wildcat, so to speak, snaps, and done more with his legs than through the air. So I think in years past, it's kind of been alternatum series or 2 series or so until you find the right guy. I think that might be something that the coaching staff tries this year. With how impressive McCaffrey has looked with his arm, I don't foresee this being a situation where he's brought in just to run. I think that would be a gross misuse of his ability.
Gotcha. And I think that's probably enough quarterback talk for now. I want to get into some of the other aspects of Rice's offense. Who are the other playmakers that Barry Odom and the Razorbacks are going to have to scheme up to stop, and how are they used in Rice's system?
I think it starts on offense with Bradley Rosner. He was a guy who missed all of last season with injuries. But by the time Rice got down to their final game, they had 1 scholarship wide receiver available to practice, and he was hurt. So they're bringing back so many guys. So Rosner's that that big body who can go up and get it, and is going to be able to contend with some of the SEC defensive backs he's going to run into. And then you have guys like Jake Bailey, who is more of your slot underneath guy who can do a couple things. He's going to be kind of the go-to option on those third medium kind of plays. So those 2 in the receiving game. Jordan Myers is officially listed as a running back. He was a high school running back, has played tight end for Rice, split out wide as a slot wide receiver. He's kind of the do-it-all guy. So you'll probably see him involved a lot as well. So it's going to be a good mix. They like their running backs. Kalen Griffin is a redshirt freshman that came on strong last year and is going to get probably the bulk amount of the carries as Rice tries to, ground and pound. So there's going to be a lot of guys involved, and there's a lot of pieces.
Yeah, that leads me right into my next question. Sam Pittman earlier this week described the Owls' offensive philosophy as bully ball because they want to run control the clock, run the ball down your throat. Is that an accurate description of the kind of offense they like to run, and is anything going to change? I know they hired a new offensive coordinator for this season.
Yeah, absolutely. That is what it is. Their mantra is intellectual brutality. And Bloomgren always goes with pound the rock, run the clock, and play great defense. That's what they're going to try and do. I think the influence you've seen so far during camp with the new OC Marquez Tuiasosopo has really been maybe a little bit more shifts implemented into the scheme and moving people around. They have done a little bit of open personnel 5 wide, which is something that you don't typically see from a team that likes to run with fullbacks. So they're going to throw a lot of different things at you, but at the end of the day, it's going to be finding different formations and different ways to find a weakness that they can get to on the Arkansas front and pick up yards on the ground.
And now let's flip to maybe the other side of the ball. Looking at the depth chart, it looks like Rice runs a 3-4. Is that right? And how would you characterize the defense there led by DC Brian Smith?
It's unique. It's kind of a 3-4, more so a 4-3. Kenneth Orji at that rush in position will have his hand on the ground sometimes. He'll be standing up sometimes. They kind of like to mix it around, and that kind of goes for Trayshawn Chamberlain, who's listed as the Viper. It's kind of college football has kind of morphed into whatever. Everybody has a different name for it, but it's that guy who is a linebacker who has to cover sometimes. And so he'll line up at deep safety. He'll line up at the line. He'll do a lot of things. So he's kind of the linchpin of the Brian Smith defense, but it's really going to, what he wants to do is trust his corners to go play on the outside on an island and then find different creative ways to bring pressure in the middle.
Gotcha. And it looks like, just looking at the roster and everything, Rice, like a lot of the teams in college football this year, have a ton of guys back. And I know that it was against a little bit of a limited schedule because, as you said, all the COVID issues and stuff happened last year. But Rice did rank in the top 25 in scoring and total defense. So who are the top guys on that side of the ball? And do you think having all that experience from last year and having success last year is going to lead to them maybe making another jump in 2021?
Yeah, I think they ended up finishing 12th in defense in the nation, which is not bad considering when they took over a couple years ago that they were outside the top 100 in defense. So 3-year turnaround from 100 to 12 is, you'll take it. Anybody will take that. I think the guys to know, George Nyakwal and Naeem Smith, I think Naeem played in the last 2 games of last year, but those guys basically missed the entire season for Rice. They're 2 veteran safeties who can make plays and most importantly will make sure the ball stays in front of them, which is huge. So those 2 guys on the back end, they do lose Blaze Aldridge at linebacker. He's playing at Mizzou now, so y'all will see him again at some point this year. He was a difference maker, but the staff feels really, really comfortable about the battle going on in camp between Myron Morrison and Desmond Baker. And then you got Antonio Montero, who's probably looking at like 100 tackle season. So those are really good. And then you got a host of guys. I think one of the things the defense is most excited about this year is the depth they have in the front 7 and on the defensive line. You'll see guys like Trey Schumann and Elijah Garcia kind of be the anchor, but you'll see a lot of bodies go through as much as possible to try and keep up with the tempo that Arkansas is going to throw at them.
And the last thing I got for you is I'm just wondering kind of what the excitement level is to the start of this season for Rice. I mean, they got Arkansas, Houston, and Texas. Not only are those good football programs, but also it's some old Southwest Conference foes. Is there a little extra layer of excitement, starting the year with 3 teams like that?
Yeah, I think so. It depends on who you ask. There's a little bit of a nervous excitement because, we talked at the beginning of this about how people really do have high expectations for this season. And it starts off, Arkansas, Houston, and Texas are probably 3 of the best 4 or 5 teams on the schedule and you get them out of the gate. So what you really don't want to do is start out, 0-3 or with a couple more losses going into the conference slate. So there's excitement. It's always fun when you get to play those teams that you recognize, because, no offense, but like, people don't get up for Western Kentucky the same way they do for Arkansas. It's just not going to happen. So the name brand is fun. Playing those big games and making those big trips is going to be exciting. But at the end of the day, Rice is going to have to put something together and figure out how to win a couple of those games. And how they go well in that stretch is kind of going to set the floor maybe for how the rest of the season plays out.
Well, I know I'm really looking forward to getting things started on Saturday. I know it's going to be a hot day in Fayetteville whenever they kick off, but I know fans won't mind it because football's back. And I just want to send out a reminder to everybody, the game is going to be on SEC Network Plus and ESPN Plus, so it's streaming only. If that confuses you, don't worry. I've got an explainer piece on HawgBeat.com. You can go check it out. It'll explain exactly how you can make sure you watch the Razorbacks this weekend. Also, be sure to head over to attheRoost.com. Check out Matthew's coverage of the Owls. And until then, I guess I'll see y'all Saturday.
Back here on the HawgBeat Hour. What a great interview that was with Matthew Bartlett. And now we get to do it ourselves. Talk about Rice versus Arkansas. Very exciting. I personally, I'm so happy that football's back and fans are going to be in the stands. And that the Razorbacks are playing a team that's not an SEC team. And that's going to be awesome. So it is Rice. The biggest story out of Rice fall camp, of course, has been the quarterback battle, mainly between Wiley Green and Luke McCaffrey. So we got some insight in the last segment from Matthew Bartlett, but let's talk about it ourselves. Personally, I see, especially later on in the season, I think the job is going to be Luke McCaffrey's. But right now, we know that Rice is going to go with 2 QBs on Saturday. Hutch, how do you think it's going to shake out? Do you think one of them is going to be more effective than the other against the Razorbacks, or do you think it's going to be 50-50 split? Just how do you see that shaking out, and who do you see being more effective for the Owls?
I feel like it's going to be Luke McCaffrey. He's so talented. We've seen what he could do against Big Ten defenses when he was at Nebraska. And yeah, he is still new to the playbook. He's only been there for a couple of months down there in Houston. So he's still learning the nuances and the checks and things like that. But once the ball is snapped, and it's football, Luke McCaffrey is the guy I would want with the ball in his hands, because he's incredibly gifted as an athlete. Mike Bloomgren, described his arm, as Matthew Bartlett said, as a howitzer. So they have a lot of confidence in his arm, which I think sometimes gets overlooked just because he is such an athletic guy. I mean, even on Rivals, when he was a recruit, was listed not as a quarterback, not as a dual threat quarterback, but as an athlete, because I guess they didn't know where he was going to fit as far as, on a football field. I mean, his dad was a really good wide receiver with the Denver Broncos, and he's got 3 older brothers. One was a wide receiver at Duke. Then obviously everyone knows Christian McCaffrey, a running back who did a little bit of everything at Stanford and is now a great pro player. And then he had an older brother that played quarterback at Michigan before transferring out of there. And then he went to Nebraska, and he was a quarterback, but he did actually play a little bit of wide receiver and actually caught some passes in real games. So that tells you if a guy is capable of not just playing quarterback in the Big Ten, but also playing wide receiver in the Big Ten. It honestly, it kind of makes me remember maybe like a guy like Matt Jones, like we saw at Arkansas back in the early 2000s. He was a guy that played quarterback for Arkansas, but probably could have played wide receiver if he wanted to, as we saw him getting drafted in the first round of the NFL draft as a wide receiver and playing in the NFL as a wide receiver. So that's kind of the athleticism Arkansas would have to deal with. And running quarterbacks have given Arkansas fits in the past. This is obviously a new team, a different different defensive coordinator than some of those games in the past. But still, it's a whole nother aspect that you have to worry about defending when you got a guy like that that's capable of running all over you as well as throwing it on you as well.
And speaking of running all over you, I mean, that's what Rice is known for. There's quotes, intellectual brutality, bully ball. They're a ground and pound team. That is what Mike Bloomgren likes to do. And that's what they're going to do against Arkansas. And if you look at Rice last year, they did only average like 120 rushing yards a game, but they still ran the ball a lot. I think they held the ball for 36 minutes a game. And I think that was second in the country last year. They only played 5 games, but still, this is a team that, they're going to be a run first team. And Alex, I want to get your opinion on this. Rice isn't the only run first team that Arkansas is really going to face, especially at the beginning of this season. There's like 4 teams in a row that you're playing run heavy teams. So how do you see the Hogs trying to counter that run attack, not just from Rice, but from a lot of these opponents they're starting the season against?
Yeah, I think you're far more equipped at the defensive coordinator position with that head coaching experience that Barry Odom brings than you were with previous coaching administrations. You're going to have answers to some of the questions that couldn't be answered before. The Georgia Southern game is one where it's really going to be up to how you play on the field, because game planning the triple option is it gives the best coaches in the country fits. You saw Lincoln Riley almost lost to Army a couple of years ago. Jim Harbaugh almost lost to Army a couple of years ago. It's a style of offense, and especially with the twist Georgia Southern brings and running it out of the gun, it's going to cause fits, but you can't look ahead to that. Rice has a very good running attack in Kalen Griffin, Ari Broussard, and Juma Ottaviano. I mean, those guys are all legitimate running backs who are going to be able to rotate in and kind of form a 3-headed monster in that Rice backfield. Pair that with with Luke McCaffrey. Sorry, he's not quite there yet. And you're going to have an offense that's going to be able to kind of cause some panic in the defensive, front seven. That's where you're going to have to look to the experience of the linebacking core to come in and kind of just do their job and shore up what they need to shore up, and make sure you're focused on this game and not looking ahead. And from player statements this week, I think the guys are looking right at this game, not looking past it to Texas or Georgia Southern or anything else.
And Rice also, you talked about that 3-headed monster at running back. They also have a guy he's labeled as a tight end, Jordan Myers, but he's a gadget guy. He's a do-it-all guy. He's actually the only Rice player who scored a rushing touchdown last year. For as often as they run the ball, it was a tight end who also returns punts and kicks that had the only rushing touchdown. So he's also a threat as well on offense. But I want to talk about just the experience that Rice has. They returned 10 starters on both sides of the ball. Now, these are 10 starters who, I wouldn't say they've played like quality opponents. Marshall was decent, but compared to SEC talent and the experience that Arkansas returns, I would say that it's not as great of experience. So, Hutch, I just want to ask you, how do you think that experience they have is going to help them out? And of course, we know it doesn't really compare to the experience that Arkansas has, but this is still a good Rice team that has talent on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, the experience is going to be huge for Rice, and we see it every year. In men's basketball, the teams that Cinderella teams in March Madness are the teams that have 5 seniors that have played together for 4 years in a row, and they have that chemistry, and they aren't fazed by these bigger teams that maybe have better athletes, like what we're going to see with Arkansas and Rice this weekend. And we also see it in baseball too at the beginning of the season. Some of these early season series teams that are loaded with juniors and seniors typically give teams even as good as Arkansas fits. So I don't know if it's quite as important in football as those two sports, but I do believe it will help Rice. These are guys that aren't suiting up and playing college football for the first time. Even if whether it be Luke McCaffrey at quarterback, he's played in the Big Ten. He's played in front of huge crowds at Nebraska. He has played in big environments, and then even Wiley Green, he's got 10 starts under his belt in his career. So it's not going to be a first time deal for him. It's quite the contrast to KJ Jefferson being a quarterback. Yeah, he has started a couple of games in his career. He's played some. But this is going to be his first time being the guy. And whoever Rice has at quarterback is going to be a little bit more experienced. Maybe McCaffrey not as much, but so I feel like that experience is going to help Rice. Is it going to be enough to help them pull off an upset? I don't think so. I don't know about that, but it is enough to make you sit back and say, okay, Arkansas has to take this team seriously. They can't just look ahead to next week against Texas.
Yeah, I think we're past the days of let's look over Conference USA teams. The last two times you did that, there was a lot of disappointment that came. So let's hope and pray that they're not looking over another Conference USA team. I do want to ask both of you. You can both answer this. What matchup do you see being the most interesting matchup? For me, I think it really is just. I think it's the Arkansas defensive line against whatever quarterback is playing. I think that, John Ridgeway is not going to be there, but I want to see this defensive line get to the quarterback because that's not something that we've seen in recent years. And I just want to see how much improvement there has been there. And especially against a Rice team that, they're not the offensive lines of the SEC. So for that's my matchup that I'm looking for, especially if Luke McCaffrey's back there. I really hope you don't see Luke McCaffrey getting 30, 40-yard runs almost every drive like we saw. I always think back to when Trevor Knight was at Texas A&M, that dude would just run all over Arkansas. And I don't want to see that happen, but it might, hopefully not. So Hutch, we'll go with you first. What matchup are you looking for?
Yeah, I was kind of leaning that same direction. I was thinking Arkansas's front seven against the running attack of Rice. I feel like that's going to be a big matchup because if they can, they'll 3 yards in a cloud of dust you and to death, and they're going to control the clock. And Sam Pittman said the other day he remembers playing against I think Georgia Tech when they had that triple option going. He said, yeah, we scored 17 points in the first half, and that was because, we scored touchdowns on our 2 drives, full drives, and we got a field goal right before half when we went and hurry up. So really, they only got like 2.5 possessions in the first half. Rice will do that to you if you let them. If you let them control the clock and stay on the field, that's how they beat you. So you really got to be able to stop them on first down, put them in some, maybe some positions where they don't want to be, where they have to pass the ball. If they got 3rd and 3 or shorter, then they're just going to try to run it down your throat. If you get them in some maybe 3 and 8, 3 and 9, something like that, they may have to pass the ball a little bit. And they may not be as comfortable with that as they are with running the ball. I mean, as we said, this is intellectual brutality. This is their head coach is a former Stanford guy. So that's kind of what they're wanting to do.
Yeah, and you speak of the head coach. My matchup that I'm really interested in is the coaching battle. I think, we're looking at 2 guys who have a combined 4 years of experience at the head coaching position coming into this year. Sam Pittman, kind of comes from that offensive line coach background. He's surrounded himself with guys who are able to get the job done in Kendall Briles and Barry Odom, versus Mike Bloomgren, who comes, he was Christian McCaffrey's offensive coordinator at Stanford. So he's got that kind of run game mentality. I want to see how the two are able to compete, off the field, and see what their adjustments are, how they come into the game, how prepared for every aspect of it they're able to come in. And I think that's going to be a huge telltale for whether Sam Pittman's able to, create those kind of upset moments, even beyond being a guy who nobody knows about.
All right, coming up next, we'll wrap up the show with some recruiting tidbits that I know everybody wants to hear. And then we're going to give our score predictions for the game this weekend on the HawgBeat Hour. Back here on the last segment of the HawgBeat Hour, joined by Andrew Hutchinson and Alex Trader of HawgBeat.com. Guys, we're going to talk some recruiting this segment, and it's exciting stuff because not only are fans allowed to be back at the stadium, but recruits are allowed to be back there as well, which is a big thing for Arkansas recruiting because you got a beautiful campus. You got a beautiful, beautiful facility, a nice stadium. And I think that helps with recruiting. So we know some guys that are going to be there this weekend for the Rice game. But I just want to know, how big of a deal is it to have them back on campus And what is the excitement level of the recruits that are going to be there this weekend?
Yeah, I mean it's a big time for Arkansas football. You mentioned the beautiful facilities, the beautiful stadium, things like that. A lot of recruits, especially those not from Arkansas, they don't realize that Fayetteville is this beautiful. They think of Arkansas as backwoods and rednecks and not anything really to be excited about. But now once you get them on campus, that gives them a chance to win them over. And there's going to be a few on campus, not really any like big time guys. I mean, most of those are probably going to be for next weekend. But I do know that Dax Courtney, an in-state kid, he's originally from DeWitt. He's playing his senior year at Clarendon. He's going to be here. A lot of the in-state guys are going to be here on unofficial visits. Then next weekend is the big one. I mean, Alex has already talked to a couple of guys that are going to be here that are big ones. So it's a very big weekend and a big aspect to this. I mean, Sam Pittman said it the other day that the coaches have to go back to work. They can't just sit around and twiddle their thumbs before kickoff. They've got to go and shake hands and talk to recruits, talk to the players' mamas and daddies and stuff. And they gotta do what they used to do after having a year off because of the pandemic.
Yeah, and one of those guys that I was able to talk to was 2023 4-star safety Jordan, who plays for Mansfield, Texas. They had their opening game at my alma mater, Bentonville West, this weekend. I was able to go check that out. Mansfield came away with the win. It was close, but after the game, I was able to catch up with Jordan, and we talked. And Brendan is from Arkansas. He's got Arkansas ties. So that's going to be a huge factor in his recruitment. We heard earlier this summer from his buddy Dallin Jones that he's strong on Arkansas, and it's somewhere that he's certainly considering. And with some of the other offers he has, Mississippi State, Kansas, USC, that's something you love to see from someone who's got that kind of prestige as a recruit. And with him coming to Texas, and with Dallin Jones coming to Texas, they're coming on their visit together, you're going to have a ton of those out-of-state guys coming, because that is kind of the red herring you're looking for. It's the game that you're certainly circling on your schedule if you can find one. And then yesterday, as well as that, the 2023 recruiting class officially opened. Coaches can contact players. You saw some screenshots, and guys were getting texts at 12 o'clock on the dot being like, hey, we're allowed to contact you now. And some of those guys that Arkansas just was able to get a hold of and got offered were 4-star tackle out of Tennessee, Bryson Sanders, and a 3-star quarterback out of Georgia, Malachi Singleton. Those are two offers who could be big for the Arkansas class. You already have 2 commitments in Shamar Easter and Jaden Ham, but adding beyond that tight end position is certainly a solid place to start for Sam Pittman's crew.
So, Alex, I want to ask you a little bit more about your interviews last Friday. You went over to that game. You talked to more than just Jordan. Tell us a little bit more about that and what you saw on the field from some of the Arkansas recruits as well.
Yeah, so at that specific game, I was able to talk to just Brendan Jordan, because everyone was kind of in a hurry to get out of there. It ran a little bit late, but I was able to catch up with Bentonville's offensive line coach and offensive coordinator that Monday. And that's, of course, for 2023 O-tackle Joey Sua, who is kind of an implant into the Northwest Arkansas area, something I'm familiar with. He's from California. Parents got a job here, and within a couple weeks of him being in the area, he already had an offer from Arkansas. And watching the film he put out from this weekend, you can see why. He looks like he was dominating on the field. And I think talking to his coach, there wasn't too much, apprehension. He likes the area. He likes being around here. He's already had a huge impact on the locker room. And that's a guy that you're definitely going to want to be able to bring in. And if he's able to adapt to those new areas, it's an easy transition from Bentonville to Fayetteville. So that's something that's definitely going to be interesting. And then I talked about him a little bit earlier, but Shamar Easter had a heck of a game at Hamburg in Ashdown's matchup there. He was able to, 2 touchdowns, a handful of pancakes, and he blocked a punt, which led to a safety. So he was getting after it on special teams as well as on the offensive side of the ball. It was a big weekend for Arkansas recruits. Rashad Dubignon had a huge run in his game. And it's just stuff like that. Looking around, Maumelle had a huge comeback win. I'll be at Maumelle against Joe T. Robinson this weekend. But Nico DeVilliers and Andrew Chambly both had great games in there as well, with DeVilliers able to go in and force a couple of turnovers.
Sticking with the 2023 class, you mentioned Shamar Easter. He's a guy, one of the 2 tight end commits in the 2023 class for Arkansas so far. And I just want to ask you, Hutch, who are some guys that once this September 1st, midnight hour hit, who are some guys that seem to be pretty pumped to get a text from Arkansas?
Yeah, I mean, they reached out to last I counted, it was over 30. It's probably close to 40. And that's just the guys that I've seen on social media that have posted about it. I saw them reach out to a quarterback whose name escapes me at the moment, but he's a guy that from Georgia, and he's also a baseball player. I'm not sure if he's being recruited by Arkansas as a baseball player, but I looked him up, and he's a top 300 recruit on Perfect Game, as well as a 3-star recruit as a quarterback. And Arkansas has shown that they don't mind having 2-sport guys. I mean, they've got Josh Oglesby right now as a running back who is also on the track team. And we got to talk to Jimmy Smith, the running backs coach, at one point during camp. And he said, man, we love those 2-sport guys. Cause I mean, it just shows you that they're incredibly gifted and athletic. And, if we can convince you to come to Arkansas because, hey, you can also play, run track. You can also play basketball, play baseball. That may be a selling point. So I thought that was kind of an interesting guy that Arkansas has already offered, as well as had on campus for, a camp over the summer, and also reached out to the first day they possibly could. But I mean, there were a whole list of guys that they offered or that they reached out to on the first day that they could, probably 40 plus guys. And these are guys that have offers, guys that don't have offers. There were several Arkansas kids on that list. I know I saw Eli Wisdom, the quarterback from Shiloh Christian, got a graphic. He hasn't been offered by Arkansas, but I think he has a UCF offer, and is being looked at by some other schools. He put up some huge numbers in their first game last week. So yeah, they reached out to a wide variety of recruits that both have offers and guys that don't have offers yet, but they're keeping an eye on over the next year and a half or so.
All right, guys, we're going to move on from recruiting and wrap the show up with some predictions for this weekend. Of course, Arkansas is what? Are they a 19-point favorite now, or is it still 18, or what's it sitting at?
I don't know what it's at right now. I saw at one point it was 19. I think I saw 20 somewhere. It's somewhere in that range, though.
Alex says 19.5. Okay. So Arkansas is a 19.5-point favorite. I'll start with my prediction. I'm going to take Arkansas 38, Rice 17. I think it's a little bold, honestly, to predict that Arkansas scores that much. I don't know what you guys think about that, but I think it's possible. But without Treylon Burks on the field, I don't know if that score is attainable or not. Hutch, what's your prediction, and do you have anything to say about my prediction?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's generally the range I'm in. I'm trying to remember exactly what I put in my season predictions, but I think it was a 3-touchdown win for Arkansas. I think I got it like 34-13, I want to say. But like you, I mean, if Treylon Burks is not in the game, that is certainly going to hurt Arkansas's offense. But it may be good in that it forces KJ Jefferson to throw the ball to someone else. There may be some growing pains for that offense for Arkansas, but I just think they're just way better athletically and gifted, that I think they should win and control the second half all the way and win by 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, I'm in that same vein. I think, letting KJ find those other guys and not necessarily have that, I guess, quote unquote, safety blanket in one of the top 5 receivers in this country, Treylon Burks. it's going to force him to become more comfortable with those other guys in the room. I'm a little bit higher on the defense in that I only have Rice scoring 10 points, but I do think those growing pains will be there. I have Arkansas winning this one just under the cover line. I have 27-10 Hogs going ahead and winning this game.
All right. I think I kind of like yours, Alex. But anyways, that's going to do it for us on the HawgBeat Hour. We'll be back with you next Thursday on ESPN Arkansas, and then Friday on the HawgBeat YouTube. And we'll be talking about Texas. I think a lot of people are going to be interested in what we have to say about that one. It's going to be a big, big matchup. And then we'll probably talk a little bit about what happened against Rice. Anyways, thank you for listening to the HawgBeat Hour. He's been Andrew Hutchinson. He's been Alex Trader, and I've been Mason Choate.